Breaking news tonight from NBC, an hour after our weekly midweek Legal AF show dropped. So we couldn't include it in there. So I wanted to hop on tonight to just tell everybody what happened. So you remember Alan Weisselberg, who is the CFO for the Trump Organization. He was being prosecuted along with the Trump Organization by the Manhattan DA's office. He was indicted under DA Cy Vance, but the trial went under DA Alvin Bragg's tenure. And before the trial, Alvin Bragg made a deal with Alan Weisselberg to cooperate against the Trump Organization. He refused to cooperate against Donald Trump himself, but he did testify at trial and was instrumental in achieving the conviction of the Trump Organization. And the Alvin Bragg's office, the Manhattan DA's office, my old office, got a 17-count conviction in that case. Now, Alan Weisselberg was represented by two lawyers, Mary Mulligan and Nicholas Gravante, and both of them were paid for by the Trump Organization, which many people surmised was the reason Alan Weisselberg, or one of the reasons, in addition to his loyalty, that he refused to testify and turn on Donald Trump because Donald Trump was paying for his lawyers. So it makes all the sense in the world. So then Alan Weisselberg is sentenced to jail. He went to Rikers Island for 4 months. I think he has a month left in that tenure. And, there's a big difference between the threat of going to jail and being in jail. And Rikers Island is not a good place. And it's been reported that he was facing additional fraud charges by the Manhattan DA's office. And it's looking like he didn't want to have additional fraud charges and spend more time in jail. So breaking news tonight is that those lawyers no longer represent him, that Mary Mulligan and Nicholas Gravante no longer represent him. Now, what could that mean? Why is that significant? What's the big deal, right? Some could say, well, the case is over. He's already serving jail time. So what does he need lawyers for? Well, if you're facing additional charges, you definitely need lawyers. And if the DA's office wants to talk to you about the fact that you are facing additional charges, you should have a lawyer. And I've always wondered, is Alan Weisselberg, in exchange for not being further prosecuted, is he agreeing to testify in the grand jury on the Stormy Daniels hush money, that case, which everyone talks about that shorthand as if it's just about paying an ex-porn star, when it's really an election interference case. It's the first time Trump tried to interfere with a presidential election, because that's really what he was doing. So it was his first election interference case, and the case where he sat in the Oval Office and wrote 11 times checks, fraudulent checks, where he made business record entries saying they were legal fees, or I should say legal retainer, when there was no such thing. And so that's the felony they're looking at, is the fact that he was misrepresenting in his business records that money in order to interfere with an election. So it's important to frame it that way, and not just the porn star case or the hush money case, because that really minimizes what the significance and the seriousness of that case. But I digress. So back to the case. That case, as we all know, is in the grand jury. We also know that case is at the very end, and Donald Trump asked that a witness be called when he was offered an opportunity to testify in the grand jury. He asked that Robert Costello, Michael Cohen's former attorney, be permitted to testify in the grand jury, which he did. And by doing that, it turns a grand jury presentation into a mini trial, because grand jury presentations don't have openings, they don't have closings or summations, they don't have cross-examination. It's usually just evidence that goes in, people and records, and it's very bare bones and it's very matter of fact. And the grand jury, then you charge them on the law and you vote. But the minute you start putting in alternate theories, like the defense witnesses or a defendant, it turns into a mini trial. And that's what has happened here. And everybody's on indictment watch speculating when are they going to be asked to vote, because they're at the end. They're at the end because you're at the defense case. So that's why we know they're at the end. So what's going on? And one question that people have had, and I've wondered, is could Alan Weisselberg be cooperating in that falsifying a business record, Michael Cohen election interference Alvin Bragg case that's in the grand jury right now, right? Could he be testifying? Now, the grand jury is a secret proceeding, so we don't necessarily know who is testifying in the grand jury and who's appearing in the grand jury. We do know that certain people have been there because they've told us, like Michael Cohen or Robert Costello. We also know that other people have testified in the grand jury, or at least gone into the DA's office where the grand jury is located, because we've seen them go in, like Hope Hicks and Kellyanne Conway and others. But one question is, would we know if Alan Weisselberg is testifying? And I don't think so, because he goes in the back door because he's in jail. So you don't see him walking in necessarily. You could, but you don't necessarily. There is a way to get him in where you wouldn't notice. And so that's a question, has he already testified in the grand jury, or is he going to testify in the grand jury? And is that why his lawyers that were paid for by the Trump organization are no longer his lawyers? So that could be what's going on. Who knows? We won't. This is all just speculation and talking about what options and possibilities are. And we do know, as I said, that we are toward the end or at the end of the grand jury presentation. There are 2 more days left before the grand jury could vote on the case, if they haven't already. Some people say are speculating whether did they vote on Monday. Charging and voting doesn't take more than an hour or 2. And I mean, they could deliberate for a long time, but not necessarily. They could vote fairly quickly. So that's not a very long, it doesn't require a lot of time. And so it's possible that they did that on Monday, but that the DA's office hasn't filed the complaint or the indictment yet, and or they haven't had it signed yet. Who knows? That's a possibility. And there's also a possibility, or it's an option, that they could ask them to vote tomorrow, or the DA's office could ask them to vote on Monday. After that, you have another 3 weeks before they come back. And it's because when they called the special grand jury to sit for the length of time that they did, they built in a pre-scheduled hiatus based on Jewish holidays, Passover, as well as the public and the school breaks that are coming up, the winter breaks, or I should say spring breaks that's coming up. And the reason they do that is because otherwise you will lose grand jurors who don't have childcare if their children aren't in school. Some people are saying, well, why can't the DA's office skip their vacation? This isn't about vacations and going skiing or on Club Med. This is truly about childcare issues for grand jurors and plans that they might have as a courtesy, because they are sitting for so long, that they always will build in time breaks like this in a long-term grand jury to accommodate scheduling and holidays. So that was scheduled long ago. Whether Alvin Bragg seeks an indictment before they go on this hiatus or not is something we will soon know one way or another. So like I said, we'll either know something in the next couple of days, or we'll have to wait a couple of weeks. But even if they do ask them to vote in the next couple of days, we might not know, because it's secret. So if they vote tomorrow, they vote Monday, we won't know until somebody leaks it. And who do I think is going to leak it first? Donald Trump, because he will be notified, because he has to surrender. And although he could surrender quietly, he could go to court, he could go in there and not have a big production. But we all know who he is and how he does things. And so that is highly unlikely. So those are the possible things that are happening right now. And watch the Legal AF that dropped today, the midweek Legal AF, for further details about the case and what's going on. And that's that.
Lock him up! Indictment season is upon us. Celebrate with the new Indictment Season t-shirt and v-neck exclusively at store.MeidasTouch.com.